Story 1. The radio keeps telling us to barricade ourselves in our homes, but nothing has happened in 2 decades. Hey everyone. I'm new to posting here, but I figured this might be a good community to attempt to get some answers, or at least spark some interest. I live in what's called the St. John Valley up in northern Aroostook County, Maine. It's a quiet place, surrounded by dense forests and open fields, hugging the Canadian border, the textbook picture of rural New England tranquility. The kind of place where the biggest news might be a truck careening into a moose or who won whatever award at the local fair, but since the very early 2000s, something strange has been happening here that no one can explain, and it's left an indelible mark on the fabric of our community. It all started back in February of '02 with a broadcast that sent the entire valley into a state of panic. An emergency alert system, EAS, was triggered, a message that terrified everyone who heard it. I've got the transcript of the first alert below. EAS tone. This is the emergency alert system. The following message is transmitted at the request of local authorities in Aroostook County, Maine. Residents of Limestone, Caribou, Fort Fairfield, Van Buren, and surrounding areas are advised to remain indoors immediately. At approximately 11:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, on February the 3rd, an emergency situation has been reported. Secure all doors and windows. Reports indicate that both animals and humans are exhibiting violent behavior. Avoid any contact with affected individuals or animals. Seal windows and doors to prevent exposure to the outside air, as there may be an airborne chemical or biological threat. If possible, move to a safe room or basement. Ensure that all household members are accounted for and remain calm. Do not leave your home until an all-clear signal is issued. Stay tuned to this station for further updates and instructions from local authorities. This message will repeat. EAS tone. The broadcast was chilling, and the aftermath was pure chaos. People genuinely believed that they were in imminent danger. Families barricaded themselves in their homes, sealed their windows, and armed themselves against an unseen enemy. In the aftermath, county news stations covered the story extensively, interviewing residents and experts alike. Despite the official explanation that followed the next morning, many people remained skeptical. I was just a kid back then, around 10 years old, but I remember the night clearly. My parents had just put my younger sister, Lily, to bed when the EAS tone blared through our house from our TV in the living room, a typically common occurrence many Mainers up here experience due to our harsh winters. Upon its end, my parents gave each other a look of concern and then stared blankly back at whatever was originally playing on the TV. They muttered some words I quite frankly don't recall, but soon thereafter, my father quickly sprang into action. He told my mom to gather anything we might need for the night while he started fortifying the house. I watched as he moved our heavy wooden dining table against the front door and used scrap wood and sheets to block the windows. In all the commotion and noise, Lily found her way back downstairs asking for some juice. My mom rushed around, grabbing blankets, flashlights, and whatever non-perishable food she could find. She kept telling us to not worry and that they were just preparing for a bad storm, but the shakiness in her voice betrayed her words. Lily, who was only 6 at the time, clung to me, her wide eyes filled with confusion and worry as I tried to comfort her, though I was just as scared. I remember my dad taping plastic sheets over the windows, using duct tape to seal the edges tightly. He assured us kids there was nothing to worry about, and all this was just in case. My mom led us to the basement, where she had set up a makeshift shelter. The basement was dark and musty, filled with old boxes and forgotten belongings. It wasn't the most comforting place, but it felt safer than the open rooms upstairs. We huddled together on an old couch, wrapped in blankets. My dad kept his rifle close by, a precaution he hoped he wouldn't need. We listened to the radio for updates, the eerie silence punctuated only by the occasional creak of the house settling. Every noise outside made them jump, further fueling our imaginations to run wild with thoughts of what might be happening. As the hours passed with no further information, we began to relax slightly, though none of us dared to sleep until my parents eventually took turns keeping watch, their faces etched with worry. Lily eventually drifted off, her head resting on my lap. I sat there, stroking her hair and trying to make sense of the situation. The fear in my parents' eyes was something I'd never forget. They were our protectors, and seeing them so vulnerable was unsettling. The all-clear broadcast finally came in the early hours of the morning, but it didn't bring much comfort. The authorities claimed the initial broadcast had been a mistake, a technical error. They assured us there was no danger, but the damage was already done. The trust in our community's safety was shattered, and a sense of unease lingered long after nothing happens up here. In the days that followed, the valley buzzed with conversations about the incident. Everyone had their own theories, from government conspiracies to supernatural explanations. Despite the official explanation, if one can even call it that, many people remained skeptical. The night became a part of our community's history, a bizarre event that no one could fully explain. As I grew older, the broadcasts continued to air sporadically. Each time, it sent a ripple of anxiety through the area, though the initial panic had dulled to a resigned acceptance. By the time I reached high school, the alert had become a sort of local legend. I became obsessed with the idea of hearing it for myself now that I was older. Hadn't caught it since that night long ago, but finally, one night, during a high school bonfire with a small group of friends, I got to the fire crackled, and the chatter of my peers filled the air, eventually drowned out by the ominous tones of the EAS. I ran to the truck radio, and there it was. The atmosphere at the party shifted instantly. Conversation stopped, and a hush fell over the group as we listened in stunned silence. The broadcast ended, and we all looked at each other, a mix of fear and excitement in our eyes. It felt surreal, like witnessing a piece of history that had come to life right before us. Over the years, these mysterious broadcasts have continued to air once or twice a year, always at exactly 11:30 p.m. The residents of Aroostook County eventually grew indifferent. The initial panic subsided, and the broadcast faded into local legend, something to be talked about at late-night gatherings and around campfires. People began to treat it like a strange, unexplainable quirk of sorts, a story to tell newcomers and a curiosity for visitors to the area, a funny prank of sorts if you happen to tell a newcomer just before one happens to air. But not for me. The mystery of these broadcasts gnawed at me, and it's why I ended up here, at WQHR as a board operator. I hoped working here at the local radio station might help me uncover some truth. I pretty much had no choice but to listen to the radio while I worked 10 hours a day. Audio engineering had been a hobby of mine and something I've hoped to get into for some time now, at least since I graduated, but I also figured it may be a good place to begin my investigation. Eventually, while on shift, I ended up catching the second of the two alerts that occurred that night. It was similar to the first, but with just enough new information to further reignite my obsession. I don't remember if I mentioned there were multiple, but this one I had never heard, even back when I was a scared little boy in my parents' basement. I guess I must have dozed off, though I have, of course, heard about it in passing. But anyways, here's the second transcript. EAS tone. This is the emergency alert system. The following message is transmitted at the request of local authorities in Aroostook County, Maine. Residents of Limestone, Caribou, Fort Fairfield, Van Buren, and surrounding areas are advised that the emergency situation reported earlier continues to persist as of 3:15 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, February the 4th. Residents must remain indoors and ensure all doors and windows are locked. Recent reports suggest that the emergency may involve a hazardous airborne agent, which may be contributing to violent behavior in animals and humans. Seal all openings, including windows and vents, using tape or plastic sheeting to prevent exposure to outside air. Avoid using air conditioning or heating systems that draw in outside air. Keep communication devices charged and nearby for further updates. Authorities are actively working to identify the source and nature of this emergency. An all-clear signal will be issued once it is safe to resume normal activities. Please remain on this station for ongoing updates. This message will repeat. EAS tone. The eeriness of this second alert left me more determined than ever to find out what's going on. Thing is, everyone in the great state of Maine already knows about these broadcasts. They've been happening at random for over 2 decades, but why in the world has nobody been able to solve this or? seems to even really care for that matter. 20 plus years later, nothing. Not a zip. The first couple days or so after the broadcasts began, people were genuinely frightened. Some took the warnings seriously, like my parents, for instance, locking themselves in their homes, sealing windows, and waiting for the all-clear that came the next morning. But as the weeks went by, and no real emergency ever unfolded, the community grew indifferent. Years later, the broadcasts became part of the county's folklore, discussed with a mix of fascination and amusement. Kids would dare each other to stay up and listen, hoping to catch the broadcasts live. Parents would tell their stories of the event at family gatherings, a cautionary tale that had lost its sting over time. I've asked around, both officially and unofficially, but no one has any answers. Our parents' generation seems to remember the first few broadcasts causing a stir, but everyone's settled into a collective state of apathy. It's as if the entire valley has just accepted this anomaly as a part of our lives. But I can't. I need to know what's happening, what happened that day. My obsession with the anomaly has driven me to the point where it's all I can think about sometimes. It's as if these broadcasts come from nowhere and disappear into thin air. Sometimes it's the second alert, other times it's the first. It's completely random, and no one has been able to notice any sort of pattern. One night, while I was working in the studio after a rare airing, happened to be the first alert this time, a regular listener called in. He claimed to remember something odd from the late 90s, a night when the air felt thick, and a strange smell lingered. He couldn't recall any specific details, but his recollection was enough to send chills down my spine. Curious to know if anyone else had a similar experience back then. At radio and television stations like the one where I work, the Emergency Alert System, EAS, operates independently of our control, relying entirely on external automation. The EAS encoder/decoder devices are designed to receive alerts from authorized agencies such as the National Weather Service or FEMA, automatically interrupting our regular programming to broadcast emergency messages without any human intervention. It's basically intended to ensure that urgent information reaches the public swiftly and efficiently. Yet, the persistent broadcasts have baffled both the valley and its local authorities for years. Despite our repeated inquiries, FEMA insists they have no clue what these unauthorized messages are and claim they have no knowledge of their origin. The situation has raised concerns about public safety, prompting local authorities to reach out to the FBI for an investigation. However, the FBI reportedly declined, further leaving us in the dark, though the unexpected refusal had only intensified my speculation. Mind you, this was only 6 months ago. My goal is to solve this mystery, not only to understand the source of these unexplained events but also to uncover any hidden truths that might be behind them. The dismissive stance of the FBI and the lack of clarity from official channels have only fueled my resolve to dig deeper. With no clear leads from the authorities, I am left to rely on my own investigation, determined to piece together this puzzle and bring clarity to this ongoing, whatever this is. I've considered all sorts of possibilities: government experiments, supernatural occurrences, mass hallucinations, or hysteria. Each theory seems more far-fetched than the last, but in a world where the impossible sometimes happens, who's to say what's too crazy to believe? I've spent countless hours looking for similar cases, looking for any pattern or connection that could explain our predicament, for lack of a better word, searched internet forums, nothing even remotely close. I've even reached out to experts in various fields, psychologists, historians, conspiracy theorists, but no one has been able to provide a satisfactory explanation. There are some nights I can barely sleep, my mind racing with possibilities and theories. I've considered the idea of mass hypnosis or some sort of conditioning, where an entire community is conditioned to forget certain events. It sounds far-fetched, but the more I think about it, the less I'm willing to dismiss any possibilities. What if those initial broadcasts were part of an experiment, and we were the unwitting subjects? Or what if I'm just crazy and this somehow was some sort of error? I've even considered setting up recording equipment to capture the broadcasts in real time, in case there are subtle nuances or hidden messages that we haven't noticed. Might be a good idea, actually. I'll keep you all updated on that. It's just hard with how infrequent they occur, nor do I think my boss would appreciate that in all honesty. My obsession has taken a toll on my personal life as well. Friends and family have grown concerned about my fixation on the long-since past event. They tell me to let it go, to move on and accept that some mysteries are meant to remain unsolved. But I can't shake the feeling that there's something important here, something that needs to be uncovered. One theory that keeps nagging at me is the possibility of a cover-up. What if the initial panic in 2002 was justified, and the follow-up broadcast claiming it was a mistake was part of an effort to keep us in the dark? What if there was an actual emergency, and those in charge have been suppressing the truth ever since? The thought sends shivers down my spine, but it's a possibility I can't ignore. So, I'm turning to you, the people of the internet. Have any of you experienced something, anything at all similar in your area? Do you have any theories about what could be causing these broadcasts? And more importantly, how can I go about uncovering more info? I'm desperate for answers and willing to try anything at this point. Whether it's similar experiences from your own lives, wild theories, or practical advice on how to investigate further, I'm all ears. My investigation isn't just a hobby, it's become my life's mission. I've dedicated myself to uncovering and solving this mystery. I've pored over countless hours of radio logs, scoured newspaper archives, and conducted interviews with anyone who might have a piece of the puzzle, and nothing. I know this sounds like some random idiot on the web delving into madness, but I assure you, there has to be something here. Something like that doesn't just happen on accident. It simply makes zero sense. These broadcasts have been a part of my life for as long as I can remember, and I won't rest until I've uncovered their secret. So, if any of you guys have any information, no matter how small or insignificant it might seem, please share it. Together, we might be able to solve this mystery and finally bring some peace to our haunted community, and my stupid brain. Stay safe. Dean. Story 2. I had been a security guard for almost 20 years, but nothing could have prepared me for the eerie silence of the old, abandoned hospital on the outskirts of town. The building, once a bustling hub of life and healing, had been closed for over a decade, its walls now crumbling and covered in ivy. Most of the locals avoided it, claiming it was haunted, but I didn't believe in ghosts. I took the job because it was quiet, the pay was decent, and I didn't mind being alone. The first few nights were uneventful. The only sounds I heard were the distant hum of the city, the occasional creak of the building settling, and the soft rustle of leaves in the wind. I would make my rounds, walking the long, dimly lit corridors, my flashlight cutting through the darkness. The hospital's rooms were empty, the beds long removed, and the medical equipment left behind was covered in a thick layer of dust. But then, about a week into the job, things began to change. It started with the footsteps. I was on the third floor, checking the old surgery wing, when I heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps echoing down the hall. At first, I thought it might be an animal, a raccoon or a stray cat that had wandered inside, but the footsteps were too deliberate, too heavy. They sounded like someone was wearing boots, just like mine. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest, and strained to listen. The footsteps stopped as soon as I did. I shone my flashlight down the hallway, but it was empty. Nothing but peeling wallpaper and broken tiles. Slowly, I started walking again, and after a few steps, the footsteps resumed, this time closer. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing down the empty corridor. There was no response, just the sound of my own breathing and the pounding of my heart. I turned around quickly, shining my light behind me, but there was nothing there. The footsteps stopped again. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I was a seasoned guard, and I wasn't about to let some old building get the best of me. I finished my rounds that night without incident, but the footsteps stayed with me, lingering in my mind like a bad dream. The next night, things escalated. I was on the second floor, near the old maternity ward, when I noticed something strange. One of the doors, which I was certain had been closed and locked, was now slightly ajar. I frowned, shining my flashlight into the room. It was empty, of course, just an old, dusty room with a cracked window and peeling paint. But as I stepped inside to check it out, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The dust on the floor had been disturbed, as if someone had walked through it recently. I could see clear footprints leading from the door to the far wall, where they abruptly stopped. My hand tightened on my flashlight, my skin prickling with fear. I had been the only one in the building for hours. There was no way anyone could have gotten in without me knowing. I quickly backed out of the room, slamming the door shut behind me. I checked every floor that night, making sure every door was locked, every window secured. But as I made my way back to my station, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. Over the next few nights, the disturbances grew more frequent. Doors that had been locked were found open, objects were moved, and the footsteps followed me wherever I went. One night, I found a wheelchair in the middle of the hallway, its wheels still spinning as if it had just been pushed. Another night, I discovered a light on in one of the rooms, a light that shouldn't have been working, given that the building had no power. I started to lose sleep. I would wake up in a cold sweat, the sound of footsteps echoing in my mind. I became jumpy, nervous, constantly looking over my shoulder. I even started to doubt my sanity. Maybe I was imagining things, I told myself. Maybe the isolation was getting to me. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. Something was wrong with the hospital, something that didn't want me there. One night, as I was making my rounds, I heard a door slam behind me. I turned around, my heart racing, and saw a figure standing at the end of the hallway. It was dark, but I could just make out the shape of a person, tall, thin, and unmoving. "Who's there?" I called out, but the figure didn't respond. It just stood there, staring at me, its face hidden in the shadows. My hand shook as I raised my flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness. But when the light fell on the figure, it vanished. There was nothing there, no one standing in the hallway, no sound, nothing. I backed away, my heart hammering in my chest. I didn't finish my rounds that night. Instead, I returned to my station, locked the door, and sat with my back to the wall, my eyes fixed on the door. The footsteps didn't follow me that night, but I could still hear them, faint and distant, echoing through the empty hallways of the old hospital. I didn't return to work after that. I quit the next day, leaving the keys on the desk without a word. The hospital remains abandoned, its hallways still haunted by the echoes of the past. And me? I never talk about what happened during those long, lonely nights at the old hospital, but sometimes, late at night, I wake up in a cold sweat, the sound of footsteps echoing in my ears. Story 3. My neighbor has been having abnormal behavior, and knowing why makes my blood run cold. The weather is feeling fantastic today. I say to my wife Anna as I head out into the backyard to do some yard work on this peaceful Saturday morning in October. "Also, I forgot you work today. Love you and have a great day," I exclaim just before closing the screen door. Saturdays have always been my favorite day of the week, and especially the mornings of them. Waking up to that noise of bacon sizzling and the smell of pancakes in the air. It just hits different, especially in autumn. But this time was different. Anna and I have this big 2-story house with a nice and pretty good-sized backyard. The house is 3-bedroom and 3-bath. Which I know is a lot for just being a couple living there without having any kids, even though I bet that will come on down the road. As I head over to the shed in the backyard to get a rake to sweep up the leaves on the ground, I hear a weird scratching noise at my fence right next to me. To give perspective on where this was, our house is adjacent to a park on the left side of the house facing from the front yard, and adjacent to our neighbor Pat on the right side of the house facing from the front yard. Scratch, scratch, scratch. 3 quiet but audible scratches. Thinking this is Pat's only pet dog Rex just wanting to play, I grab the rake and head towards the backyard walkway to rake up the fallen orange leaves. Scratch. Scratch. There it was again, this time extremely loud and very audible to hear, even from being away from the shed and fence in which the noise is coming from. "Michael, can I get your hand on something real quick? All you have to do is walk over to the fence and help me with something." "Sure, buddy," I say back to Pat. thinking that he just needs my help with fixing the fender or something, even if there was anything to fix, or maybe he just wanted to have a conversation like he usually does to get my attention by asking for help. I get to the fence and I say, "Pat, I am here. Tell me what you need my help with." No answer, and then scratch, scratch. Again with that damn scratching. This time now in long intervals, about 4 seconds each. I get fed up with this annoyance where I pop my head over the fence to see what the hell or who the hell is making that noise. But there is no one there. Pat must have been playing a trick on me and ran off or something. I swear I had heard it just seconds ago and he called my name across the yard to ask for some help. Whatever. I mutter out loud in annoyance and head back inside the house, heading to the bathroom to do a quick leak. I get interrupted by the ring of the house phone. Yes, we still use a house phone even though it's the 21st century. I can hold it, I tell myself as I head over to the phone. Ring, 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 ring. A deafening noise that caused my eardrums to break. I pick up the phone. "Hello," I say into the other side. "Who is this? What do you want?" Silence. But then that familiar noise. Scratch, 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 scratch. The same scratching, this time on the phone, and I can feel my ears tickle from the noise. "Pat, is this you?" I say back with a stern voice. "Ha ha ha." A deep voice sounds on the other end. It sounded like Pat, so I knew the only person it could be was him, but something was just off about it. This isn't how he acts ever. Usually he invited me and Anna over all the time for dinner. Keep in my mind he lives alone and has never had a wife nor even a girlfriend in his 30+ years he's been alive. The phone hangs up after this weird demonic maniacal laughter. This is getting fucking annoying. I can't stand this shit anymore. I say out loud. I'm gonna head over there now and see what the hell he thinks is so funny. I put my shoes on and close the front door, heading over on the sidewall to Patrick's house. A nice house. A house that looks like a little cottage in the middle of the woods. But I notice something strange as I walk up to his front door. A lamp is on in his living room and I can make out the silhouette of a person. It's Pat. What the fuck is he doing standing there with the curtain shut? The hell is he staring at? Just standing there, no movement or anything, nothing. Just completely still, like the shadow of a mannequin. I go up to the door and knock and say, "Hey Pat, it's Michael. Just wanted to go and check up on you to see if everything is alright, buddy." Suddenly after I say this, I hear commotion from Pat as he starts to walk very fast around the house. But nowhere near the door to answer it. Come on man, stop playing this prank on me if it is. It was funny before, but now it's getting old. I mumble into the doorframe. After I say this, a light shuffle across the carpet to the door, then it stops. "Pat, I know that you are behind there. Please open this door and we can talk this out, whatever is going on." "Okay buddy. If you need some help, I can help you," I say. Scratch, scratch, scratch. The same old scratching, now increasing in its speed like a cat on furniture. "The fuck you doing, dude?" I yell out in annoyance. I am sick of this bullshit. Open the door and let's talk this weird shit out, bro. I wouldn't be here if I were you. A faint whisper behind the door. "Pat, what are you talking about, buddy?" I say. No response. "Okay, man, fine. I'll leave." Leaving the doorway, the same silhouette of Pat is by the same lamp in the living room, but this time the silhouette is bigger, like Pat is leaned up against the curtain. But the silhouette, not curtain, even moved. It was all just completely still like before. Hell, I couldn't even tell the difference of a statue and Pat with how still he was. Alrighty then, bro is acting fucking creepy and I'm just gonna go home and mind my own business. I mutter to myself, a little fearful shaky tone in my voice as I spoke that sentence. I enter my house and finally go to the bathroom, now remembering that I had been holding it the whole time. I just got so off track with Pat's weird behavior, to the point where I forgot how to pee. Ah. I sigh in satisfaction as I urinate. The toilet flushes and I wash my hands and the running water gets interrupted by a noise. Scratch, scratch. Now the scratching sounds like outside of my bathroom door. Creeping closer to open it and punch Pat, another noise is let out that shook me to my core. A groan, a very deep and death-defying groan. This is enough, Pat. I yell out. Tell me what you are doing or I will call the police and tackle you to the ground. Suddenly I hear a loud flopping noise outside of my door like something had just fallen into the ground. Checking under the crack of the door, I see Pat's fingers reaching from through the crack. Then one of Pat's eyes come to my sight, I would say is right, and I see blood everywhere. He had just gouged out his own eye. What the fuck is going on? I yanked open the door and what I see is Patrick on all fours, right eye gouged out and bloody, left eye bloodshot red. What the fuck, Pat? He starts to bark and growl like a dog, which shocked me. This joke is enough, I get Halloween is coming up. But you took this way too far. All of a sudden Pat jumps up onto his feet and pulls out a knife from his front left pocket. I reacted fast enough to this moment and grabbed his arm so he wouldn't stab me. Pat then starts biting my neck and I yell out in pain. Gripping his arm tight, I manage to get the knife out of his arm and stab him in the chest. I will never forget that moment. Blood dripping down his neck as he coughs it all up from his mouth. He whines like a dog that has been bitten and says one last thing before passing out from blood loss. I ate Rex. He says. I call the cops and they get an ambulance to take Pat to the ER and fortunately he survived the stabbing. I didn't get arrested or anything because of self-defense. Raiding the house, the cops found 3 disturbing things left out in the living room. Rex's decapitated head being eaten away at by maggots, a butcher knife, and a letter from a cult. Apparently Pat had been in a cult for a while now and would perform rituals at the park next door to my house. Pat was told to eat a human to sacrifice, but he couldn't do it, so they told him to eat any of his own pets. Rex was his only pet, so he ate him, cutting his head off, leaving it on the ground, and eating the rest of the body. The worst part about it to me is how he acted like he was a dog. Like he was Rex, the dog that would always scratch at the fence by the shed. The dog that would always make that familiar noise. Scratch, scratch, scratch.